according to new reports, former U.S. President Trump reportedly planning to launch his 2024 campaign during the period between Labor Day and the 2022 midterm elections. Joining us now to discuss is former Trump 2020 senior advisor Jason Miller. Jason, this has been a hot topic for quite some time, and now we're getting some actual details. What are you hearing?
Well, 2 weeks ago, the New York Times came out and said that President Trump was going to announce over 4th of July. That didn't happen. Now you have the Washington Post saying it's between Labor Day and the midterm elections. And I imagine once we get to that point, if he is not announced, then maybe the Wall Street Journal will jump in and say it's going to be some point in this winter. Who knows? Here's the thing. President Trump is going to keep people waiting and keep people guessing all the way up to the point when he announces. And I think he'll do it on his own timetable, in his own special way of delivering it. But it's going to be, I think it's going to be much more of a surprise in the way that he does it and with the timing of it. And it's not going to be what people expect. I don't know if he's formally made that decision in his mind that he wants to run. I certainly hope that he does, though.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because we're hearing a lot of people in the other news media outlets saying that there's no way he's going to run, saying that he would be beaten potentially by someone like DeSantis. Are they underestimating the power of former President Trump?
Absolutely. I mean, what President Trump has built with the MAGA movement is the greatest political force that we've ever seen in American history. And the fact that as an ex-president, he still has this loyal support base, the fact that the most recent national polls for the Republican primary show that he would lead by 40 points over his next nearest competitor, who in the most recent polling is Governor DeSantis, who I think is a very powerful governor and has done a very excellent job. But let's not mix things up here. President Trump is the political juggernaut in America right now, and especially with the weakness that we're seeing out of the Oval Office from Joe Biden. I tell you, President Trump looks better and better for coming back and winning in 2024.
Yeah, and former President Trump also returning to Washington later this month, Washington, D.C., for the first time since the end of his presidency. Now, his planned July 26th visit, he's going to be headlining an event for the America First Policy Institute. Now, this comes as new polling shows nearly half the party's primary voters want a new GOP nominee for president in 2024, with a growing number pledging to desert him if he wins. A little different from what you were just saying. What is your response to that?
Well, I'd push back on that and say that the most recent national polling that I've seen showed President Trump leading 56-16. And when you talk about one candidate coming in, even if they've already been president of the United States and have this base, for a candidate to already have, at a minimum, half the Republican field with him as he looks to potentially run, that's pretty powerful. That's pretty daunting for anyone who would think about challenging him. Now, there will be other Republican candidates who run in 2024, even if President Trump announces. I think that the bigger and the broader the field that decide to run actually helps President Trump, much in the same way that it did in 2016. But here's the thing. He is going to be the absolute political force going into 2024. That's why the newspapers write about him every single day, even right now.
Now, Jason Miller, about 30 seconds before you go, but if he does run, as you're saying he will, if he does get the GOP nomination, who do you see him running against? We're
Gavin Newsom.
Gavin Newsom.
California Governor Gavin Newsom. I do not think it'll be Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. Their polling numbers are absolutely in the tank. They're not going to be able to get away from the gas prices, the inflation, the chaos around the world. Obviously, Rob Schmidt's doing a great job of covering the invasion at the southern border. The country is a complete mess. The world is destabilized because of Joe Biden. I really hope President Trump runs so we can get some sanity restored in the U.S. and around the world.
All right, Jason Miller, really fascinating insights here. Thanks so much.
Thank you.